Welcome to another video by ldsnerds, the Obscure Gospel History series. In this video, we explore the head injuries and likely mental illness of Sidney Rigdon. Sidney was born February 19, 1793, on a farm near Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. At about 24 years of age, he converted to Christianity and became a preacher with the regular Baptists. He moved to Ohio and eventually became a Baptist minister and pastor of the First Baptist Church in Pittsburgh in 1821. Throughout his ministry, he was looking for the New Testament church of old, which practiced the laying on of hands and healing the sick. In late October 1830, 4 missionaries from the restored church visited Rigdon in Ohio. This included Parley P. Pratt, who Rigdon had converted to the Baptists 1 year earlier. After investigating the church for a couple weeks, Rigdon was baptized and ordained an elder in the middle of November 1830. More than 100 of his congregation and community followed him into the church. Rigdon met Joseph Smith in December of 1830, and they almost immediately began working on the retranslation of certain parts of the Bible. Rigdon was known as a great speaker and soon spoke for the church. He was ordained a high priest in June of 1831, and was present for the vision of the degrees of glory that became Doctrine and Covenants, section 76. Although he was chastened by both Joseph Smith and the Lord for his ego, Rigdon was a fierce defender of the church, and his talent for debate helped to quell bad feelings about the church at this time. In March of 1832, Joseph Smith and Sidney Rigdon were attacked by a mob and tarred and feathered. During the attack, Sidney Rigdon was dragged by his heels, with his head unprotected, and it bounced across the steps and the ground. When the mob was finished with him, he lay in a meadow barely breathing. While convalescing, he teetered between life and death, delirious and, according to one report, even suicidal. According to his brother, this was apparently the second head injury in his life, as he had been thrown from a horse at age 7, which reportedly changed his personality. Now, from 1833 to 1844, Rigdon was a key figure in the church, going on missions, serving in the first presidency, acting as a spokesman for the church, and performed as a teacher, including delivering some of the famed lectures on faith. He helped lead efforts to petition the government for redress of church members' treatment in Missouri. He was active in the founding of the city of Nauvoo and served in various civic capacities. He was even nominated to serve as Joseph's running mate in his campaign for President of the United States in 1844. After the attack in 1832, however, it seemed that something was wrong with Sidney Rigdon. There are several accounts of very odd behavior and depression in the months immediately following the attack, including being temporarily removed as counselor for a time. But Rigdon eventually recovered enough to be ordained again and returned to traveling. However, his inconsistent, erratic, and contentious behavior would continue. His son later wrote Sidney was of a bilious temperament, a specific condition which would later become known as bipolar disorder. In his dedication of the Kirtland Temple in 1836, Rigdon reportedly condemned other religious sects and likened them to the opposers of Christ in his day. In 1838, Rigdon gave a couple ill-advised speeches, including stating that the church would fight back against any mob that threatened them. This helped heighten tensions in the area, which led in part to his being arrested and thrown in Liberty Jail with Joseph and others later that year. Rigdon was the only one released early due to his poor health, including regularly having seizures and again being temporarily delirious. In late 1839, he was reported as near death from an unrecorded ailment and was unable to join the prophet in important meetings, including with President Van Buren. Despite holding many positions in Nauvoo, he rarely spoke publicly and was often sick, disabled for months at a time and unable to attend to most of his duties. The cause went unrecorded, and it's possible that he was in severe depression at this time. Towards the end of 1843, Sidney and Joseph's relationship had deteriorated for various reasons, and Joseph called a special meeting to have him removed as his counselor, charging him with neglecting his duties, aiding the church's enemies, and defrauding the innocent. After Sidney's impassioned defense and an intercession by Hiram on his behalf, Joseph reluctantly agreed to keep Sidney in his position. Just before his martyrdom, Joseph said, "Poor Rigdon, I am glad he has gone to Pittsburgh out of the way. Were he to preside, he would lead the church to destruction in less than 5 years." After Joseph and Hiram were martyred in June of 1844, Rigdon returned to Nauvoo, claiming that he could save the church and offered himself to be its guardian. In a meeting held on the 8th of August 1844, Sidney tried for almost 2 hours to persuade the saints to sustain him as the leader of the church. Witnesses stated it was not a typical Rigdon speech, whether by the Lord's intervention, his failing health, or both. Brigham Young then explained the order of succession taught privately by Joseph Smith, and in a miraculous transfiguration, people present saw Joseph's visage on Brigham Young and heard him speak like Joseph. Despite the fact that his relationships with Joseph and the church in general were tenuous at best, and that he lived in Pennsylvania at this time and not Nauvoo, Sidney refused to give up. He dismissed the Quorum of the Twelve's offer to build up the church in Pittsburgh, and reportedly began calling others to positions of authority and promoting himself as leader of the church. He was excommunicated. Rigdon quickly established a competing Church of Christ, complete with its own president and Quorum of the 12. His followers soon began leaving his church, however, and he remained isolated from the church for the next 30 years until his death in July of 1876. Sidney Rigdon was a prominent figure in the early church, and for better or worse, was responsible for much of the church's public face for a long period. He kept true to his testimony of the Book of Mormon throughout his life, including dismissing claims he had written it. It is unclear just how big a role his head injuries had directly on his long-term physical and mental health. It is likely that the mob attack exacerbated a childhood injury and further affected his mental disorder. Had his health remained better, his mental illness been addressed, and his ego kept in check, there is no telling what he might have accomplished. That's all for this video. Please let us know what other topics you would like to see covered in the future, and like and subscribe to our channel. Thank you for watching another LDS Nerds creation. Visit our store for geeky gospel-themed merchandise.